Emma ran as fast as her legs could carry her, her heart hammering against her chest like a drum. The forest stretched endlessly before her, dark and shadowy, with tall trees that blocked the faint moonlight. Every crack of a branch, every rustle of leaves made her jump. She dared not look back, afraid of what, or who, might be following. Her breaths came in short, ragged gasps, and sweat ran down her forehead, but she could not stop. She could not let them catch her. The pain in her legs was growing, her shoes catching on roots and stones, scraping her ankles. But stopping meant danger. Stopping meant being found. The thought of what awaited her if she were caught made her push forward, ignoring the fatigue that threatened to drag her to the ground. "Please, please don't let them find me," she whispered to herself, her voice trembling. Her words were barely more than a breath in the still night. But speaking them aloud somehow gave her a tiny sliver of courage. Her mind was a storm of memories, each one sharper than the last. She remembered the day everything changed, the day she realized she could no longer stay where she was. The quiet smiles and polite words of neighbors had hidden dark secrets, and the friendly faces she trusted had turned into threats she couldn't ignore. The danger had come slowly at first, almost imperceptibly. But then it escalated, until there was no choice left. She had to run. She had to escape. The path through the forest was uneven and treacherous. She stumbled several times, catching herself on tree trunks, scraping her hands against rough bark. Her fingers were raw, her palms sore, but she did not stop. Her eyes darted around, searching for any sign of movement. Shadows seemed to shift and reach for her. Every sound, an owl hooting in the distance, a fox rustling in the underbrush, made her jump. But she learned to force herself to keep moving, to focus on the narrow strip of ground ahead. After what felt like hours, though it might have been only minutes, she paused behind a large, fallen tree. She pressed herself against the rough wood, her chest heaving. The forest was silent except for the sound of her own breathing. She risked a glance over her shoulder. The path behind her was empty. No one followed. For a moment, relief flooded her, and she sank to the ground, wrapping her arms around her knees. But it was only a moment. She knew better than to trust that the danger had passed. They were out there, somewhere, watching, waiting. As she sat, she tried to think. She had no map, no plan, and very little knowledge of the forest beyond what she had seen in fleeting glimpses during her desperate escape. She had no way to know which way was safe, which path led further into danger, and which might take her to safety. Panic rose in her chest, but she forced it down. Panicking would only slow her, make her careless. She could not afford carelessness. She could not afford to be caught. Suddenly, a flicker of light caught her eye. At first, she thought it was the reflection of the moon on wet leaves. But as she focused, she realized it was a small fire. Someone was there. She froze, unsure what to do. The instinct to hide warred with the desperate hope for help. Could she trust a stranger? Could anyone be trusted anymore? She crept closer, careful to stay low, moving behind trees and bushes. The firelight revealed the figure of a man, sitting calmly by the flames. He was rugged, with a beard that shadowed most of his face, and clothing that suggested he was used to life outdoors. He had a worn rifle leaning against a rock beside him, but for now, he seemed unaware of her presence. Emma's mind raced. Should she call out? Should she run past him and hope to find another path? The thought of running blindly terrified her almost as much as staying hidden. Finally, she made a choice. She stepped from her hiding spot, hands raised slightly, hoping to show she meant no harm. "Please, I need help," she whispered, her voice trembling. The man looked up, surprise flashing in his eyes. He studied her for a long moment before speaking. "Who are you? What are you doing out here?" His voice was cautious, but not immediately hostile. Emma swallowed hard, trying to calm herself. She could not reveal too much. Not yet. She had to be careful. I'm running. I need a place to hide, she said. Her words quick, almost a plea. The man's eyes narrowed, suspicion clear. He was not the kind of person to trust easily, that much was clear. Yet something in her desperation made him pause. Maybe it reminded him of someone he had known long ago, or maybe it was simply human instinct to help. After a long, tense moment, he nodded. All right, you can stay for now. But you don't tell me everything. And I don't ask too many questions. Understand? Emma nodded quickly, relief washing over her in a wave so strong she nearly forgot to keep her guard up. Thank you, she whispered. She moved closer, careful not to come too near, still wary of sudden danger. The man, whose name she later learned was Jack, gestured to a spot near the fire where she could sit. She sank down, grateful for the warmth and the temporary safety. As they settled, Jack handed her a small piece of dried meat and a canteen of water. It was simple, rough food, but it was enough to restore some of her energy. She ate quickly, grateful not just for the nourishment but for the tiny thread of humanity in a night that had been filled with fear and uncertainty. They spoke cautiously, carefully avoiding any details that might reveal too much. Jack shared bits of his own story, hints of a life lived outside the law, always moving, always hiding. Emma listened, understanding that his world was different but not entirely unkind. She realized that help could come from the most unexpected places. And sometimes, survival depended on trust, even when it was dangerous. The forest around them seemed quieter now, as if it had accepted their presence for the night. The fire crackled softly, throwing shadows that danced across the trees. Emma sat there, wrapped in a blanket Jack had given her, feeling a mixture of fear and relief. She knew the danger was far from over. But for the first time in hours, maybe even days, she felt a small spark of hope. Her mind kept returning to the thought that had driven her through the forest. She must survive. She must not be found. Whoever was after her was relentless, but she had made it this far. And now, for the first time, she had an ally, a protector, even if a reluctant one. She did not know what lay ahead, but she knew she could face it, at least for now, with someone by her side. Night deepened, and the cold crept in. But Emma kept moving, stretching, and keeping alert even as she tried to rest. Jack remained quiet, his presence a steady reminder that while the forest was dark and full of danger, it also held unexpected safety. Somewhere between fear and hope, Emma found a fragile balance, a temporary peace in the midst of chaos. And though the night was long and the forest vast, she made a silent promise to herself. She would survive, she would not be found, and she would keep running until the danger could no longer reach her. Emma stayed close to the small fire, wrapped tightly in the rough blanket Jack had given her. The warmth was comforting, but it could not erase the fear that still gripped her. Every snap of a branch, every rustle of leaves beyond the circle of firelight made her flinch. She felt exposed, vulnerable. But she also knew that staying hidden forever was impossible. She had to move forward, to find safety. And, for now, Jack was her only option. Jack watched her quietly, his eyes scanning the shadows around them. He did not speak much at first, letting her eat and rest. But the occasional glance suggested he was thinking. He was not a man used to company, not someone who welcomed strangers easily. Emma could sense it in his careful posture, the way he held his rifle within reach, the way he measured every word before speaking. Yet, despite his caution, there was a subtle kindness in the way he offered her food and fire. After a long silence, Jack finally spoke. "You shouldn't be out here alone," he said, his voice low but steady. "They could be anywhere." And Emma swallowed hard, unsure how much to reveal. She did not know him, could not yet trust him fully, but she needed help. and she needed it now. I had no choice, she whispered. I had to leave. If I stayed, I don't know what would have happened. Jack nodded, as if he understood more than she realized. He didn't ask who was after her, or why, at least, not yet. That silence, that respect for her boundaries, gave her a small sense of relief. She was not being interrogated. She was not being judged. She was simply being allowed to exist, for the moment, without immediate threat. The forest was quiet around them, though the darkness pressed in close. Jack finally motioned for her to follow. We should move, he said. It's not safe to stay here. I know a place, not far from here, where we can rest without worrying about people stumbling on us. Emma hesitated. She had no map, no sense of direction, and her trust in strangers was fragile. But she also knew she had no choice. Staying meant being found, and being found meant danger. She nodded, letting him help her to her feet. Her legs trembled, but the movement, the act of walking forward, gave her a sense of control she had not felt since her escape began. As they moved, Jack kept a careful eye on their surroundings, stepping silently over roots and rocks, moving with the ease of someone familiar with the forest. Emma tried to match his pace, though her exhaustion made each step difficult. She wanted to ask questions, to understand more about him, but something in his quiet determination made her hold back. Now was not the time. Now was only about survival. They walked for what seemed like hours, though the sky above remained dark and unchanging. Emma's mind wandered to thoughts of the people who were after her. She remembered the last time she had seen them. The fear in their eyes, the threats that had been whispered. She shivered, the memory making her muscles tense. Jack seemed to sense her anxiety, placing a reassuring hand on her shoulder, though he said nothing. The gesture was enough. Eventually, they arrived at a small clearing hidden by thick trees. A shallow cave had been partially dug into the side of a hill, and Jack led her inside. It was not much a dirt floor, walls of packed earth, and just enough space for them to sit, but it offered safety. He quickly built a small fire at the entrance, careful to keep it low so that smoke would not reveal their location. You can rest here, he said. I'll keep watch. Emma sank to the ground, leaning back against the wall of the cave. She was exhausted, but sleep did not come easily. Her mind replayed the events that had led her here. The narrow escape, the fear, the uncertainty. Yet, there was also a strange sense of relief, knowing that, at least for now, she was safe. Jack moved around the cave quietly, checking their perimeter and arranging their meager supplies. She watched him, realizing that, despite his rough exterior, he had a careful, protective side. As night deepened, they shared more of their stories, cautiously. Emma spoke in fragments, careful not to reveal too much too soon. She told Jack about her childhood, her dreams, and the moments that had led to her flight. Jack listened, sometimes nodding, sometimes offering brief, quiet observations. In return, he shared hints of his own life, stories of survival and mistakes, battles fought, and roads traveled. The two of them, despite their very different experiences, found a strange connection in shared vulnerability and necessity. The conversation was interrupted by distant noises, an owl hooting, the rustle of leaves, the wind moving through the trees. Emma flinched at each sound, but Jack remained calm. His calmness was contagious, slowly teaching her to observe without panicking. She began to notice patterns in the forest sounds, learned to distinguish harmless noises from potential danger. By the time dawn began to break, painting the sky in soft oranges and pinks, Emma felt a tentative sense of hope. She had survived the night. She had stayed hidden. She had not been found. And, perhaps most importantly, she had someone she could rely on, even if only temporarily. Jack and Emma prepared to leave the cave, moving carefully through the morning mist. They traveled lightly, avoiding paths that might be seen by others. Jack led the way, his knowledge of hidden trails and secret paths proving invaluable. Emma, though weary, felt her confidence grow. She learned quickly, following his instructions, observing his methods, and absorbing every piece of advice he offered. Throughout the day, their bond grew. Not through words alone, but through shared experience. Each obstacle they overcame, together a stream to cross, a fallen tree to climb, a suspicious passerby to avoid built trust. Emma began to see Jack not just as a protector, but as a companion in her fight for survival. She realized that survival was not only about escaping danger, but about finding allies, even in the most unlikely places. As night fell again, they found another hidden spot, this time beneath the roots of a large tree. Jack built another small fire, and they settled in for the night. The forest seemed less threatening now, less oppressive. Emma felt safer, though she remained cautious. She had learned that safety was temporary, fragile. But with someone like Jack by her side, it was possible. They shared a quiet meal, and Emma found herself smiling faintly for the first time in days. It was a small, fleeting smile, but it was real. Jack noticed but said nothing, understanding that words were unnecessary. They had survived another day. That was enough. Before sleep claimed them, Emma whispered softly to herself, almost as a promise, "I will survive. I will keep going. I will not let them find me." Jack, sitting nearby, kept watch, his presence a silent reassurance that, at least for now, they were safe. The night stretched on, quiet and still. But Emma's thoughts were alive, with possibility. She had escaped danger, found someone to trust, and discovered strength she did not know she possessed. She realized that while the journey ahead was uncertain and filled with challenges, she was no longer completely alone. Survival, she understood, was not just about running, it was about moving forward, step by step, with courage and determination. And so, as the forest slept around them, Emma allowed herself a moment of peace, however brief. She knew that tomorrow would bring new challenges, new dangers, and new decisions. But for now, she was safe. For now, she had hope. And that, she realized, was worth everything. The morning air was crisp, carrying the faint scent of damp earth and fallen leaves. Emma woke early, her muscles stiff from the hard ground beneath her. She glanced at Jack, who was already awake, scanning the horizon with careful, practiced eyes. The sun had not yet fully risen, and the forest around them was still quiet. But Emma could feel the tension in the air. Danger was always near. She had learned that by now. Jack motioned for her to pack what little belongings they had, and they moved silently through the underbrush. He knew the forest well, taking paths that were hidden from anyone who might be following them. Emma followed, careful not to make noise, her senses alert to every sound. The snap of a twig, the whisper of wind through the trees, the sudden movement of a bird overhead. Every small detail mattered, and she had learned to notice them all. As they walked, Emma thought about how quickly her life had changed. Only a few days ago, she had been living in a world she thought was safe, surrounded by familiar streets and familiar faces. Now, everything was uncertain. Each step carried risk, and every shadow could hide someone who wished her harm. Yet, despite the fear, she felt a strange sense of strength. She had survived so far, and with Jack's guidance, she had a chance to survive even longer. By midday, they reached a small stream. The water was clear and cold, and Emma knelt to drink, cupping her hands. Jack waited patiently, keeping an eye on the forest around them. The sound of the flowing water was soothing, a rare moment of calm in a world that had become chaotic and dangerous. Emma felt the tension in her shoulders ease slightly as she drank. Even small comforts like this, she realized, could make a difference in survival. They moved on, avoiding main trails and roads. Jack explained why he chose certain paths, teaching Emma to read the signs of the forest: broken twigs, footprints, and unusual movements of animals. Each lesson was vital, not just for their immediate survival, but for her growing understanding of the world she now had to navigate. Emma listened intently, absorbing every detail, realizing that knowledge could be as powerful as speed or strength. As the day wore on, the forest grew thicker, their branches intertwining, creating a shadowy maze. Emma stumbled once, catching herself on a low branch. Jack paused, offering a hand, and she accepted it gratefully. "Careful," he said quietly. "We can't afford mistakes." His tone was firm but not harsh, a balance between caution and encouragement. Emma nodded, feeling the weight of responsibility not only for her own survival but for the trust Jack had placed in her. Suddenly, the sound of voices carried through the trees. Emma froze, her heart racing. Jack stopped immediately, signaling her to be silent. They pressed against the thick foliage, barely moving as the voices grew louder. Emma could make out fragments of words, but not enough to understand who they were or what they wanted. Fear gripped her again, cold and heavy. But Jack's calm presence helped her stay focused. They waited, barely breathing, until the sounds faded into the distance. "That was close," Jack whispered once the danger had passed. "They're getting closer." Emma's stomach tightened. She had feared this moment, and now it had come. The people searching for her were relentless, and every step forward seemed to bring them closer. She realized that hiding alone was no longer enough. They had to move, strategically, carefully, and quickly. She had to trust Jack completely, and for the first time, she understood the full weight of the danger she faced. As they continued, Jack shared more of his experience. He told her about times he had been hunted, the careful plans he had made, and the mistakes he had learned from. Emma listened, realizing that survival was a combination of knowledge, observation, and courage. Each story gave her insight, and each lesson made her feel slightly more prepared for the challenges ahead. She began to understand that fear, though powerful, could be managed with the right skills and mindset. The day grew long, and the sun began to dip toward the horizon. Emma and Jack found a hidden grove, surrounded by dense trees and a small hill that offered a natural barrier. Jack started a small fire, low and controlled, and Emma helped gather supplies, careful not to draw attention. They shared a quiet meal, the silence between them comfortable, filled with mutual understanding rather than words. As night approached, the forest seemed alive, with sounds rustling leaves, distant calls of animals, and the occasional snap of a branch. Emma's nerves were taut, but she had learned to move beyond panic, focusing instead on observation and awareness. Jack kept a close watch, his eyes scanning the shadows, ready to respond to any threat. Emma realized that this vigilance, though exhausting, was now part of her life. She had to be constantly alert, ready to react at a moment's notice. During the night, they moved again, following hidden paths and avoiding open areas. Jack showed her how to leave minimal traces, how to disguise their movements, and how to listen for signs of others. Emma absorbed every lesson, her confidence growing. She realized that while she had started as someone frightened and vulnerable, she was slowly becoming capable and resourceful. Survival was teaching her lessons she could never have imagined. At one point, they had to cross a shallow river. The water was cold, and Emma's feet slipped on the smooth stones. Jack extended a hand, steadying her, and together, they crossed safely. The river was more than just a physical obstacle. It was a reminder of the constant challenges they faced, and the teamwork required to overcome them. Emma felt a bond forming, not just of necessity, but of trust and shared experience. By dawn, they reached a secluded part of the forest where Jack had previously found shelter. It was a small, hidden hollow beneath a large tree, protected from view. They settled in, exhausted but alive. Emma leaned against the tree, feeling the weight of the previous day's journey. Her body ached, her mind was tired, but she was grateful. They had evaded discovery, survived the threats, and learned more about the forest and about each other than she had ever expected. Sitting by the small fire, Emma reflected on everything she had learned. She realized that survival was not just about running. It was about thinking, observing, and adapting. She had discovered strength she did not know she possessed, courage that emerged in moments of fear, and a growing sense of determination. Jack had become more than a protector. He had become a teacher and a companion, showing her that even in the darkest moments, guidance and support could make all the difference. As the night deepened, Emma whispered to herself, a quiet promise in the darkness. I will keep going. I will not let them find me. I will survive. The words felt powerful, a declaration of resilience. Jack, sitting nearby, kept his watch, silently acknowledging her determination. He had seen fear, desperation, and now, strength. It was a reminder that even in a dangerous world, people could adapt, learn, and endure. And so, as the forest settled into night, Emma felt a mixture of exhaustion and hope. She had survived another day, learned to navigate the dangers around her, and grown stronger in ways she could not have imagined. The journey ahead remained uncertain and filled with challenges. But for the first time, she felt capable of facing them. The danger was real, the pursuers relentless, but she had found a way to fight back, not with weapons, but with knowledge, courage, and trust. The forest was quiet, but the silence carried a weight heavier than any sound could. Emma moved cautiously, following Jack through narrow trails hidden beneath the thick canopy of trees. Every step was measured, every sound analyzed. She had learned by now that the forest could be both sanctuary and trap. And the people chasing her were clever enough to exploit any mistake. Jack's eyes darted constantly, scanning the shadows for movement. He had warned her that today might be dangerous. He had sensed the closeness of the hunters. They had been tracking them for some time, leaving subtle signs behind. Broken twigs, unusual footprints, and displaced leaves. The pursuit was relentless. Emma's stomach tightened as she realized that, for the first time, the danger was not distant. It was near, possibly even surrounding them. Suddenly, Jack froze, raising a hand to signal Emma to stop. Ahead, barely visible through the trees, were figures moving carefully along a faint trail. Emma's heart pounded, and a wave of fear washed over her. This was the moment she had feared, the confrontation she had hoped to avoid. She pressed herself against a tree, trying to become part of the shadows, while Jack whispered instructions in a low, urgent tone. Stay quiet, follow my lead. Don't make a sound, he said, his eyes never leaving the approaching figures. Emma nodded, gripping her knees and forcing herself to control her breathing. She felt her pulse racing in her ears, every nerve alert. She had faced fear before, but this was different. This was immediate, real, and unavoidable. Jack led them around a small bend, carefully moving behind a dense thicket that concealed their presence. They crouched low, waiting for the right moment to move. Emma could see the pursuers now. 3 men, cautious but determined, scanning the forest with keen eyes. Each carried a sense of menace, though their faces were partially hidden by the shadows. Emma realized that any sudden movement could give them away. Follow me exactly, Jack whispered. We move when I move. Keep your head low. They crept along the forest floor, silent and precise, every step deliberate. The pursuers paused occasionally, and Emma held her breath, barely daring to blink. She was amazed at Jack's skill, his ability to navigate the forest and remain undetected. She had learned a lot from him, but seeing it in action was different, impressive, and reassuring. Despite their caution, the danger was palpable. Emma's mind raced with possibilities. What if they were seen? What if the pursuers had more people nearby? What if they were cornered? Each thought made her stomach twist with fear. But she forced herself to focus. Panic would only make mistakes more likely. She had to be calm. She had to be alert. After what felt like an eternity, Jack found a small depression in the earth, partially covered with foliage, where they could hide temporarily. They sank into it, crouching low as the men passed by, so close that Emma could hear their voices whispering to each other. Her hands trembled, but Jack's steady presence gave her courage. She realized that trust, in moments like this, was more valuable than any weapon. Once the men had moved on, Jack led Emma further into the forest, choosing a hidden path he had scouted before. He explained that the pursuers were persistent and clever, but they could be outsmarted with patience and strategy. Emma listened intently, absorbing every detail. She understood that survival was no longer just about running. It was about planning, predicting, and thinking ahead. As night fell, they reached a clearing that offered temporary safety. Jack started a small fire, low and controlled, and they rested briefly. Emma felt her muscles ache from constant movement, but she also felt a surge of determination. She had survived this long. She had evaded capture, and she had learned to fight fear with focus. Suddenly, a sound from the edge of the clearing made her freeze a snapping branch, a soft rustle. Jack's hand went immediately to the rifle at his side. Emma's heart leapt into her throat. The danger was here, now. They had been found. 3 figures emerged from the shadows, moving cautiously toward the firelight. Jack stepped forward slightly, keeping his stance calm but ready. "Stay behind me," he whispered. Emma obeyed, crouching low and keeping herself partially hidden. The pursuers stopped a few meters from them, scanning the clearing. One of them spoke, voice low and firm. "We know she's here. Don't try anything." Emma's stomach turned, but she forced herself to remain silent. Jack's eyes never left the men, calculating, assessing. He realized that this confrontation would require more than stealth. They might have to act to survive. Suddenly, Jack made a move, stepping slightly to the side to create a distraction. Emma saw the pursuers flinch, and in that moment, she realized she had a role to play too. She could help, even if only in small ways, by staying quiet, alert, and ready to move. Every instinct she had learned over the past days came into play. The standoff stretched on, tension thick in the air. The pursuers were cautious but determined, and Jack remained calm, controlled, and strategic. Emma realized that courage was not the absence of fear, but the ability to act despite it. She had been scared for days, but now she felt a strange clarity, a focus born from necessity. Eventually, the pursuers retreated slightly, realizing they were not going to succeed immediately. Jack and Emma used the opportunity to move, slipping into a denser part of the forest where they could remain hidden. They moved quickly but carefully, knowing that the danger was still close. Emma's heart was pounding, but she felt alive in a way she had not expected. She had faced the threat directly and survived. As they paused to rest, Emma and Jack shared a brief conversation. Quiet, but meaningful. "You did well back there," Jack said, his tone calm but approving. Emma nodded, feeling a sense of pride mixed with exhaustion. She realized that the ordeal had changed her, had forced her to grow stronger, braver, and more resilient than she had imagined. The night continued, filled with cautious movement and constant vigilance. They navigated through hidden paths, avoiding open areas and staying alert to every sound. Emma felt her senses sharpen, her awareness heighten. She was learning not just to survive, but to anticipate, to understand the patterns of danger, and to react with intelligence and calm. By dawn, they found a secluded spot beneath a thick cluster of trees. The area was hidden from view, and they could rest for a short while. Emma sat down, her body aching, her mind exhausted. But she felt a quiet sense of triumph. They had survived the confrontation. They had evaded capture once again. And, more importantly, Emma had discovered a strength within herself she had never known. Jack settled nearby, keeping watch, while Emma allowed herself to relax slightly. She reflected on the events of the day, the fear, the chase, the standoff. Each moment had been terrifying, but each had also taught her something new about courage, strategy, and the importance of trust. She realized that survival was not only about escaping danger, but about learning to navigate it, understanding it, and finding ways to stay one step ahead. As the forest settled into a quiet morning, Emma whispered to herself, a vow in the stillness. I will survive. I will not be caught. I will keep moving. Jack, sitting silently nearby, acknowledged her determination with a simple nod. The bond between them had grown stronger, forged in the fires of shared danger and mutual reliance. They had faced the confrontation and emerged alive, but the journey was far from over. Emma knew that more challenges awaited, more dangers lurked in the shadows. Yet she felt ready, more prepared than ever, to face whatever came next. The ordeal had tested her, shaped her, and strengthened her. She was no longer just a frightened girl running through the forest. She was a survivor, capable, alert, and determined to protect herself. And so, as the forest stretched endlessly around them, Emma and Jack prepared to move again, carrying with them not just the lessons of the past days, but also the unspoken understanding that courage, intelligence, and trust were their most powerful allies in the dangerous world that lay ahead. The sun rose slowly over the horizon, painting the forest with soft, golden light. Emma felt a quiet relief settle over her, though her muscles were still sore and her mind alert. The night had been long, filled with tension and close calls, but for the first time in what felt like forever, there was a sense of calm. She looked at Jack, who was scanning the forest, as always, and realized that while danger was never fully gone, survival was possible. They had been moving steadily for hours, avoiding main paths, carefully stepping over roots and rocks, and using the forest's natural cover to remain hidden. Jack had taught her to watch for signs of other people, broken twigs, disturbed leaves, and unusual sounds in the underbrush. Emma had learned quickly, her instincts sharpening with every step. She felt a strange pride in her newfound skills, understanding that they were not just tools for survival, but symbols of her resilience and courage. Eventually, they reached a small clearing near a stream. Jack had discovered it on one of his earlier journeys, a hidden place where they could rest safely for a longer period. The stream provided fresh water, and the surrounding trees created natural barriers from prying eyes. Jack gestured for Emma to sit and rest while he checked the area carefully. The sense of safety was rare, and Emma took a deep breath, letting herself relax just enough to feel it. You did well, Jack said quietly after a few moments, noticing her weary but attentive expression. You're stronger than you think. Emma felt a small, tentative smile form on her lips. She had come a long way from the frightened girl who had stumbled into the forest just days ago. She had survived the chase, evaded pursuers, and learned to trust someone in a world that had felt completely unsafe. Thank you, she replied softly. I couldn't have done it without you. Jack shrugged, his expression unreadable. But there was a glimmer of approval in his eyes. It wasn't easy. But you adapted. That's what matters. Well. One why. One why. One why. One why. One. 111Y. 1111. They worked together to set up a temporary camp, careful not to leave any evidence of their presence. Jack had a few supplies, and Emma helped gather what she could. Dry leaves for bedding, small branches for the fire, and some food that could last them a few days. Each action, though simple, felt significant. She realized that survival was about these small, careful choices, each one adding up to safety and endurance. As the day wore on, Emma and Jack shared stories not just of survival, but of their lives, their hopes, and their fears. Emma spoke of her family, her dreams, and the moments that had shaped her before everything changed. Jack spoke of the life he had led on the run, the mistakes he had made, and the lessons he had learned. Through their conversations, a deeper connection formed, one built on trust, respect, and shared experience. Despite the calm, Emma remained aware of the lingering danger. The people who had pursued her were persistent, and she knew they could appear at any moment. Jack had taught her to balance caution with confidence, and she practiced it constantly, keeping watch, listening for unusual sounds, and planning their next moves. Each skill she had learned added to her sense of control in a world that had once seemed completely chaotic. As evening approached, they built a small, controlled fire. The light and warmth were comforting, but Emma knew it was temporary, and she remained vigilant. Jack moved around the camp quietly, checking their surroundings, while Emma organized their limited supplies. The routine, though exhausting, was grounding. It reminded her that even in the most dangerous circumstances, small steps and careful planning could create safety. That night, as they rested, Emma reflected on everything that had happened. She remembered the fear of her first night in the forest, the desperate flight, and the tense moments of being pursued. She also remembered the moments of courage, the lessons learned, and the trust she had built with Jack. Each memory carried weight, but also a sense of accomplishment. She had survived against the odds. She had grown stronger, smarter, and braver than she had ever imagined. Jack noticed her quiet reflection and spoke softly, almost as if reading her thoughts. "You've come a long way. You're not the same person who ran into this forest. You've learned to face fear and keep moving forward." Emma nodded, feeling the truth in his words. "I never thought I could do it. But now, I feel like I can handle almost anything." The next few days were spent cautiously, but with a growing sense of security. They moved slowly, only when necessary, and used the forest's natural cover to remain hidden. Each day, Emma's confidence grew. She learned not only to survive, but to anticipate danger, to understand the movements of others, and to rely on her instincts as well as the skills Jack had taught her. During this time, Emma also began to think about the future. She knew that eventually she would need to leave the forest and find a more permanent safety. But she also understood that running blindly was no longer the answer. She needed a plan, preparation, and careful thought. Jack helped her consider her options, discussing ways to reach safety without drawing attention. And she absorbed every detail, determined to make the right choices. One afternoon, while resting near the stream, Emma looked at Jack and said quietly, "I don't know what will happen next, but I feel like I can face it now. Not because I'm fearless, but because I've learned how to survive." Jack smiled faintly, a rare expression for him. That's the right way to think about it. Fear isn't gone, but it doesn't control you anymore. You've taken control. The final days of their forest journey were spent preparing for the next step. They gathered supplies, planned routes, and reinforced their understanding of the environment around them. Emma felt a growing sense of independence, knowing that while Jack was there to guide her, she could also trust herself to make decisions and take action. The forest had become both a teacher and a testing ground, shaping her into someone resilient, aware, and capable. By the time they were ready to leave the forest, Emma felt a mixture of relief and anticipation. She had survived danger, learned crucial skills, and grown stronger in ways she never imagined. Jack had been an unexpected guide and protector, showing her that even in a harsh, dangerous world, trust and human connection could make survival possible. As they stepped out from the dense trees and into a path leading toward a safer area, Emma looked back briefly at the forest. It had been a place of fear, danger, and uncertainty, but it had also been where she discovered her strength. She felt gratitude for the lessons it had taught her and for the ally she had found in Jack. Jack noticed her glance and spoke quietly. "We're not completely safe yet, but the hardest part is behind us. From here, it's about being smart and cautious." Emma nodded, feeling a calm determination. "I understand, and I'm ready." The journey forward was still filled with challenges, but Emma no longer felt helpless. She had survived the chase, faced fear head-on, and learned to trust herself as well as others. The ordeal had transformed her, giving her confidence, awareness, and the courage to move forward. As the sun rose higher, Emma felt a sense of hope she had not experienced in a long time. The danger might not be gone completely, but she had the skills, knowledge, and resilience to face it. With Jack by her side, she knew that she could navigate the world beyond the forest, cautiously, intelligently, and bravely. And so, as they walked toward the promise of safety, Emma made a quiet vow to herself. She would survive. She would not be found by those who sought to harm her. She would keep moving forward, step by step, using every lesson she had learned. The forest had tested her, and she had endured. Now, the future awaited, and she was ready to face it. The forest receded behind them, but its lessons remained. Emma carried with her the knowledge that courage is not the absence of fear, but the ability to act despite it. She had discovered her strength, and she knew that no matter what challenges lay ahead, she would face them with determination, awareness, and hope. For the first time in a long while, she allowed herself to feel a sense of peace. She had survived, she had grown, and she had hope. And though the path ahead was uncertain, she would meet it with courage, careful steps, and the knowledge that she was stronger than she had ever imagined.